Hello, and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Shane Bigham. Coming up in this edition, tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians are on their way back home in northern Gaza after the Israel-Hamas ceasefire took effect. U.S. President Donald Trump's order to pause all federal funding has met strong opposition. Celebrations continue across China as the country marks the first day of the Year of the Snake. We begin in the Middle East. Tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians are on their way back home in northern Gaza following the ceasefire. Nadra Al-Tibi has more from the Strip.
Now I will move to the north of Gaza Strip with more than 1 million of the displaced people moving to the north of Gaza Strip, passing through the Linwari area. We are packed our bags, leaving the tents and the difficult life in the tents, leaving the hunger and the displacement in the south of Gaza Strip.
We all feel happy, even though we no longer have a home. But we are returning today, and returning to the north and to our neighborhoods represents a holiday for us.
Now, we are in the Linwari area in the south of the Strip after the Israeli army withdrew from it. This area, thousands of people were killing and missing in it. Also, this area separated the south of the Strip from its north. Finally, we are returning to the north of Gaza Strip after more than 15 months of the displacement and dispersion.
All our houses have been damaged and there's no house left for us in Gaza. We are trying to prepare ourselves and find a tent. At least we will get to live on top of the rubble of our houses.
People here are walking to the north of Gaza Strip, are walking more than 6 kilometers to reach to the north of Gaza Strip.
That was Nadra Al-Tibi reporting. Turning to North America, U.S. President Donald Trump's order to pause all federal funding has met strong opposition. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the planned freeze on federal grants, loans, and other financial assistance. The freeze affects billions of dollars of spending on health care, housing assistance, and disaster relief. Trump's political opponents have also vowed to challenge the directive. Poppy Mputing has more from Washington, D.C.
The Trump administration says the move will rein in an out-of-control federal budget, while critics call the spending freeze an unconstitutional power grab, and a number of lawsuits have been filed. And just moments before the funding freeze was slated to go into effect, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration not to halt grant funding for open awards, so those already signed off on and in process, until February 3rd. This is when another hearing will be held. So this is a temporary and partial pause on the funding freeze. Funding for new programs, however, remains frozen, and the broader pause in federal funding remains in effect. Now, this move by the Trump administration is unprecedented, widespread, and potentially devastating to millions of Americans. Now, it's unclear exactly which agencies and programs will be affected, and there's no indication how long funds will be frozen. Agencies have a February 10th deadline to provide information detailing their programs, which will be reviewed, according to a memo circulated by the Office of Management and Budget on Tuesday. Democratic politicians are sounding the alarm. Let's hear from Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
The blast radius of this terrible decision is virtually limitless, and its impact will be felt over and over again. It's not going to hit each American family in one way. It's going to hit them in multiple ways. The only people who might be immune to this are the ultra wealthy.
So as to who exactly will be impacted is not yet clear. However, the scope of this funding pause will be sizable, considering how many agencies across the country rely on federal funding. This includes senior citizens, low-income households, at-risk children, vulnerable women, veterans. This is just to name a few. Key sectors will also be impacted as federal funding dries up, including universities, medical research departments, and nonprofit organizations.
That was Poppy Mputing reporting. As the new U.S. administration's cracking down on illegal immigration, many migrants heading to the U.S. are thinking about whether to turn back. Alistair Baverstock has more.
After 5 months of waiting at Mexico's southern border, Dunia Pineda and her family spent the last of their money on a flight to Tijuana after an asylum interview with the US authorities was set for January 21st.
Hi, Donald.
It was a day too late. Donald Trump suspended America's asylum system following his inauguration as president, and now these migrants from Honduras face the long journey back to Central America.
We're a family of 5, and to get back to Honduras, we need about $1,000. But right now, we have nothing.
Dunia and her family aren't the only ones stranded. Some 30,000 appointments like theirs were cancelled, while about 270,000 asylum hopefuls who had been actively working to secure legal passage are left hanging in Mexico.
Facing a US border that's now closed to them, thousands of asylum seekers from other Latin American countries here in Mexico are considering what to do next. For some, that means beginning the long journey back to their home countries, retracing their steps back along a perilous migrant trail.
Penniless travel by plane is unaffordable, and returning south by road through Mexico is a gauntlet.
There are many dangers on the way back, and people on the way who can do us harm. It's dangerous. In crossing Mexico, we put our lives at risk.
In Mexico's northern border region, migrants find themselves stuck between the proverbial rock and a hard place. Joao Chavez is more than 6,000 kilometers from his Peruvian hometown and says for the moment he'll remain in Tijuana, keeping his American dream alive.
We're stuck between a physical wall to the north and a psychological wall to the south. So staying in Tijuana is what we've decided to do. It's the most viable and safest option to survive until another way appears.
That was a report on migrants affected by the U.S. crackdown on illegal immigration. In Africa, protesters in the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo have attacked a number of embassies over the conflict in Goma. Attempts to revive the two-peace initiatives are underway. The Nairobi process and the Rwanda process collapsed due to disagreements between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda. Robert Nagila has more.
On the move, tens of thousands of civilians fleeing Goma, the capital of North Kivu province, following its capture on Monday by M23 rebels. The takeover of the city of more than 1 million residents has sent shockwaves across global capitals. Kenya's President William Ruto, the current chair of the East African Community, has called for an extraordinary summit on Wednesday. Both Rwanda and the DRC are EAC members, but they blame each other for the escalation in violence.
Both of them have confirmed their participation in the summit.
Kinshasa has long accused neighboring Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels, a charge Rwanda denies. Kigali, on the other hand, accuses the DRC of providing a safe haven to the democratic forces for the liberation of Rwanda. As part of the Luanda process, a ceasefire agreement was signed in August last year in the capital of Angola. But talks collapsed in December ahead of a summit to sign a peace deal.
Earlier on during the negotiations, there was understanding on the possibility of the M23 having talks with the DRC government. On its part, the DRC government rejects any talks with the M23, and this have therefore led to the summit meeting being postponed.
The result was an escalation in fighting, leading to the capture of Goma. Experts say a political solution is needed.
For a breakthrough is on the question of what to do with and how to go about and establishing an effective political process for the M23 question. But apart from the M23 question, there is also the issue of Rwanda's concern, which relates to the armed rebel group that operates in eastern DRC, the FDLR.
On Sunday, The UN Security Council called on the M23 rebels to halt their offensive and for external forces in the region to immediately withdraw. It also urged both Rwanda and the DRC to return to talks. According to the group of experts report, among the issues it says should be addressed is the presence of Rwandan forces in eastern DRC and the DRC's support for the FDLR.
That was Robert Nagila reporting. Finally, in Asia, celebrations are underway across China on the first day of the Year of the Snake. In Shandong Province, Zerbo is holding a lantern festival to welcome the new year. Organizers set up over 120 lantern installations featuring folktales. An ancient town in the southwestern city of Chongqing is holding various activities featuring traditional performances. Parks in Beijing received 150,000 visitors on Tuesday, the first day of the week-long Spring Festival holiday. One of the traditional ways to celebrate the Chinese New Year in Beijing is to visit temple fairs, which offer a blend of food, vendors, folk art performances, and many other festive activities. Zhou Jiaxin visited the Dongyue Temple Fair, one of the oldest in the Chinese capital, to find out more.
Now, we know this is the first Spring Festival marking the nation's biggest celebration, categorized as UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity. So unlike more commercialized temple fairs, what these temple fairs offer is more about cultural heritage, harmony, and hope, which is the key element of the Spring Festival, I would say. Now, this temple itself is a 14th century architectural marvel from the Yuan dynasty, blending Taoist, Buddhist, and other folk religious elements. Now, to showcase the Chinese intangible cultural heritage and legacies, the fair also entertains the locals with different types of Chinese line dances across the region, and also with drumming troops, and also they will present Peking opera through the day. Now, those stalls here also display some Chinese traditional handicrafts like sugar painting, paper cutting, also paper windmill also, so those stone figurines. And the temple itself is also a folk custom museum where visitors can also learn the Taoist cosmology and traditional ethics and Chinese traditional beliefs. So you can have a really immersive experience of this cultural fusion of solemn rituals and also the living traditions and folk entertainment. So people here can enjoy this, and this year's temple fairs in Beijing promise you a really culturally dynamic and unforgettable Spring Festival. And good thing about that is people can enjoy week-long celebrations of that.
That was Zhou Jiaxin reporting. Recapping the headlines, tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians are on their way back home in northern Gaza after the Israel-Hamas ceasefire took effect. U.S. President Donald Trump's order to pause all federal funding has met strong opposition, and celebrations continue across China as the country marks the first day of the Year of the Snake. That's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sport, and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Shane Bigham. Thanks for listening.